let's talk about the Trump administration's goals here behind all these tariffs, Arthur. Do you think it's shifted somehow, evolved? Is it different from April 2nd and now? Because in the beginning, a lot of folks were talking about how this is really the idea of using the trade deals and tariffs to create some sort of a coalition to punish China or to cut off a trade with China, to gang up on China. Do you think that's not the case anymore?
Yeah, well, I think the problem in analyzing the Trump administration's goals is it depends on who you talk to, right? So I think my view has been from the beginning that Trump's goals are, number one, he wants to show everyone who's boss. So he wants countries to show that they recognize that he's the top dog and that he's powerful. And then he wants to have a bunch of things that he can call deals. And then he wants, at the end of the day, to have a lot of tariffs, right? That's basically what he wants. It's not more complicated than that. Now, there are a lot of people within the administration who have more specific goals. And as you said, Scott Bessent was saying early in April that, the whole strategy here is to use these trade deals to put a lot of pressure on China. That clearly has failed because they've done all of these deals. They're still negotiating with China. China has a lot of leverage against them. And I think there's been some reportage that the U.S. negotiators have tried to get various countries to sign on to various kinds of things relating to China, mostly on the security side as the price of these trade deals. And I think the take-up has been pretty tepid because, frankly, look, even South Korea, U.S. ally, U.S. troops stationed in the country, their economic future is really tied to China, right? And most countries have very, very deep relationships with China on an economic front that they're not really willing to compromise. So, I don't think it's realistic for the U.S. to think that they can create this kind of coalition against China. I think the best that the U.S. can do at this point is come up with a deal which gives them better access to rare earths and rare earth magnets, including for the U.S. military. That's, I think, what they're really negotiating for, is just to get something out of China.
Yeah, and South Korea is a prime case in point in terms of not being able to really choose one side between the U.S. and China, especially under the current presidency in that country as well. A lot is on the table, obviously. It's not just about rare earths. It's not just about the semiconductors. It's the fentanyl issue. It's the Russian oil, Iranian oil, and U.S. businesses operating in China. So realistically, November 9th, was it? Are you expecting to see some sort of a deal around then, or are we going to get another extension?
No, I think it's likely. All the signaling that they've given is that, with a little additional time, 1, 2, 3 months, they can come up with something. I think the reality is, if you look at what the practical deal space is, it's a pretty small number of items. So one, as you said, fentanyl, 20% tariffs on China because they're supposedly not controlling fentanyl precursor exports enough. Chinese have signaled that they're willing to do a deal there. I think that's doable. And the rest is all about export controls. And it's just a question of how much export controls is the U.S. willing to give up in order to get a more assured flow of the things that China can export control, which is the rare earths and the magnets. So one way or the other, and I think both sides would like to have a deal because Trump wants the feather in his cap. I think the Chinese would like to see some more certainty in their trade picture. So I think there are a lot of incentives to get something done, but we should have pretty narrow expectations for what is going to be in that deal. It is not going to transform the world by any stretch of the imagination.
And just to dig a bit deeper into the kinds of leverage China may have here, you mentioned rare earths, but also turning to China's domestic situation a bit more. We've got economic data that has come out suggesting that the deflationary pressure on China is still really strong, particularly on the manufacturing side. So, how do you think, sort of looking at the domestic economy in China, how much pressure is China under to get a deal done with the U.S.?
I think actually not that much. So at the end of the day, if they can't come to an agreement and the Chinese have to walk away because they think that they're not going to get anything that's useful, I think they have the ability to walk away. So number one, if you look at their exports, there have now been tariffs big tariffs on Chinese goods going to the U.S. for several months. And Chinese exports are doing fine. There's a lot of transshipment through third countries. They've been very successful at building markets in other countries. Their manufacturing sector is very adaptable. So I think they've shown that they can take the pressure of these tariffs and it doesn't hurt their exports. And then if you look at the domestic economy, it's not great. It's continually sluggish. They've got this big overhang of the property market, et cetera, et cetera. We know that. But I think that the policymakers are comfortable that they've kind of stabilized growth at a level that they can endure, and that there's not that much more that the U.S. can do to hurt them and make their economy worse. So I think that the Chinese are actually in a pretty solid position here, and they don't have to take a deal that doesn't give them something that they want.